What do you do when the law can't help you? When you've done everything right, put up the signs, followed the rules, and people still treat your home like a public toilet? You have two choices. You can surrender, or you can get creative. For me, creativity came in the form of 3 lawn sprinklers, a laundry room faucet, and a Chicago suburban night where the temperature plunged far below zero. The people who stole my property that night wanted to party. By the time I was done, their cars wouldn't be going anywhere until spring. If you believe that justice sometimes requires a little bit of ingenuity, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you are not going to want to miss the fallout from this one. And be sure to like this video, because it helps send a message that respecting other people's property isn't optional. Now, let's go back 20 years to a quiet street where a Cold War was about to turn nuclear. Our family story isn't one of old money or inherited empires. It's a story built on sweat, savings, and the American dream, Chicago style. We own 2 apartment buildings, side by side, 3 flats, as they're called around here, 6 units in total. We weren't just landlords, we were residents. We lived in 2 of the units. My parents in one, and my wife and I in another. The other 4 were for our tenants, good, hard-working people who paid their rent on time and respected the property. Our street was a carbon copy of itself, for about a mile. A long, straight road, lined with these 3 flat buildings. One after another. It was a dense, tight-knit area, and with density comes the eternal urban problem: parking. Most of these buildings were built on tight lots, with maybe a single garage spot out back, if they were lucky. Most had no dedicated parking at all. Finding a spot on the street after 5 p.m. was like finding a winning lottery ticket, but we were the exception. Our 2 buildings sat on a slightly larger, combined parcel of land. It was our home, so we'd invested in it. We had a proper paved parking lot, small sea of asphalt, that could comfortably hold 16 cars. It was our single greatest amenity, a luxury in this concrete jungle. Each of our tenants was guaranteed a spot. We had spots. There were even a couple of extra for guests who knew how to ask. For decades, this system worked in perfect harmony. It was a quiet, unspoken agreement of mutual respect. Then, slowly at first, like a leaky faucet, things started to change. A strange sedan would appear, tucked away in a corner spot. Then a beat-up minivan would be there for 2 days straight. These weren't our tenants. They weren't their guests. They were opportunists from other buildings, people who knew street parking was a nightmare and saw our lot as a free-for-all. At first, I tried being nice. I'd leave polite, laminated notes on the windshield. "This is a private lot for residents only. Please do not park here again. Thank you." Most of the time, the car would be gone the next day, and I wouldn't see it again. But for every one that listened, another took its place. The frustration was a slow burn, a constant, low-level hum of irritation. This was our home. It felt like someone walking into your living room, putting their feet up on your coffee table, and changing the channel on your TV. The breaking point, the moment my frustration crystallized into real anger, came on a crisp autumn afternoon. I pulled in to find a gleaming, obnoxious sports car I'd never seen before, parked defiantly in one of the spots right by the entrance. It was a tenant's designated spot, and they were due home from work any minute. That was it. No more notes. I pulled my own car up and parked it directly behind him, bumper to bumper. I blocked him in completely. There was no way he was getting out without talking to me. I went inside, a grim satisfaction settling in my gut. I waited. Maybe an hour later, I heard the roar of an engine. Not the polite startup of a normal car, but an angry, aggressive revving. I looked out the window, just in time to see the unthinkable. The sports car reversed. Not onto the pavement, but onto our lawn. It bumped over the curb, and then the driver gunned it. The tires tore deep, muddy ruts into the grass we spent every weekend manicuring. He didn't stop there. He plowed straight through a row of ornamental bushes my mother had planted years ago, snapping branches and tearing them from the earth. Then he swerved back onto the street and sped off, leaving a trail of destruction and disrespect in his wake. I stood there staring at the carnage, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It was rage. A hot, white-hot fury. This wasn't just about parking. This was a violation, a deliberate act of vandalism and contempt. I called the police. An officer came out, looked at the tire tracks, looked at the mangled bushes, and gave me that weary, familiar shrug. I hear you, sir. I really do. But he was on your private property. There's not much we can do. We didn't witness it, and unless you have him on video, it's your word against his. It's a civil matter. A civil matter. Those words echoed in my head, a confirmation of my powerlessness. The law, which was supposed to protect property owners, had its hands tied. I was on my own. So, I did the next logical thing. I called a professional towing company. I paid them a handsome fee to install 2 large, official-looking signs at the entrance to our lot. Big red letters on a white background. Private property, resident parking only. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. It listed the tow company's name and number. We'd still have to make the call to authorize a tow, but the message was clear. This was no longer a friendly request. This was a warning with financial consequences. And for a while it worked. The random cars stopped appearing. The sense of order was restored. I started to relax. I thought the battle was won. I was so wrong. The war hadn't even started. It was New Year's Eve. The kind of Chicago area night that you feel in your bones. The air was thin and sharp, and the temperature was plummeting into the single digits, with a wind chill that made it feel like the Arctic. I was driving home late, around 10 p.m., feeling that festive end-of-year spirit. I turned onto our street, ready to pull into my spot and settle in for the night. And then I saw it. My brain couldn't quite process it at first. Our parking lot was full. Not just full, it was overflowing. Every single one of our 16 spots was taken. But it was worse than that. Cars were double parked, blocking in the first row. Cars were parked haphazardly in the fire lane. They were nosed into every conceivable nook and cranny. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It was an invasion. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a hot, surging tide of adrenaline. My hands clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. This wasn't a few random opportunists. This was a coordinated, deliberate takeover of our property. I got out of my car, leaving it on the street, and walked through the lot. I didn't recognize a single vehicle. Not one. My tenants' cars were nowhere to be seen. They were either out for the night or had arrived home to find this nightmare, and were forced to park blocks away in the freezing cold. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling from a combination of cold and rage. I dialed the tow company. The number from our big red signs burned into my memory. A tired voice answered, "Yeah, A1 Towing." I explained the situation, my voice tight with controlled fury. I need at least a dozen cars towed from my private lot. Immediately, the man on the other end let out a long, weary sigh. "Buddy, look, I'd love to help you. But it's New Year's Eve. Every drunk in the tri-state area is getting their car towed tonight. I've got a 2-hour wait for a fender bender on the expressway. For a private property tow-out like yours, honestly, I can't get a truck to you for at least 4, maybe 5 hours. We're just swamped. 5 hours." The words hit me like a physical blow. By then, the party would be over. These people would come stumbling out, get in their cars, and drive away scot-free. They would face 0 consequences for this flagrant act of disrespect. They would have their party, ruin our night, inconvenience all of our tenants, and leave us to clean up the mess. The feeling of powerlessness I'd felt with the police came rushing back, but this time it was 10 times worse. I hung up the phone and stood there, in the center of my captured territory, the bitter wind whipping at my face. The sound of distant music and laughter drifted from a building down the street, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. The frustration, the anger, the feeling of being utterly disrespected, it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. The tow company couldn't help me for 5 hours. Fine. The police couldn't help me. Fine. I looked at the cars, gleaming under the cold security light. I looked at the frozen asphalt beneath my feet. And then, an idea began to form. It was a terrible, beautiful, magnificent idea. An idea born of pure, cold fury. If the tow trucks couldn't move the cars, then I would make it so the cars couldn't be moved at all. I turned and walked with a newfound purpose towards our basement storage room. My heart wasn't pounding with anger anymore. It was beating with a slow, steady, methodical rhythm, the rhythm of a plan. I dug them out from behind the lawnmower and the bags of rock salt, the tools of summer. 2 oscillating sprinklers, one of those old-school impact sprinklers, and every inch of garden hose we owned. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. It was below zero out. This was going to be better than towing. This was going to be poetic. My first challenge was physics. In this cold, the water would freeze inside the hose before it ever reached the sprinkler. But I had a solution for that, too. I ran one of the hoses not to the outdoor spigot, but through a basement window and into our laundry room. I screwed the brass fitting onto the hot water tap of the utility sink. I cranked the handle all the way. Hot water, the lifeblood of my plan. It would keep the hoses and the sprinkler heads from icing up, ensuring a continuous, uninterrupted flow. I dragged the first sprinkler out into the center of the occupied lot. The hose trailed behind me, steaming faintly in the frigid air. I positioned the sprinkler to cover the first cluster of 4 cars. I walked back to the laundry room and turned on the water. The effect was instantaneous and glorious. A fine, steaming mist erupted from the sprinkler head, arcing gracefully through the night air before descending upon the unsuspecting cars. The sound was a gentle hiss and pitter-patter against the metal and glass. But where each supercooled droplet landed, it didn't just wet the surface, it froze on contact. I stood there for a minute, watching. A thin, clear film was already forming on the hoods and windshields. It was working. For the next 5 hours, I became a vengeful god of winter. Every 30 minutes, I'd go outside, my face wrapped in a scarf, and move the sprinklers. It was a meticulous, calculated operation. I wasn't just watering them. I was targeting them. I aimed the spray at the door seams, forcing water into the cracks where it would freeze solid, welding the doors shut. I directed a steady stream at the rubber seals around the windows, creating an impenetrable bond of ice between the glass and the frame. I made sure to douse the door locks, filling the keyholes with water that would soon become solid steel. I sprayed the grills, the windshield wipers, the tires. I didn't just want to ice the cars over. I wanted to ice them shut. And I didn't stop with the cars. I let the sprinklers run wild over the pavement, turning the entire surface of the parking lot into a treacherous 1/4-inch thick sheet of glass. I sprayed the street in front of the cars that were blocking everyone in, creating a slick, impassable barrier. By 3 a.m., the job was done. I went out for one last look. The scene was breathtaking. It looked like a photograph from a bizarre Arctic apocalypse. Every car was encased in a thick, glittering cocoon of ice. Long, jagged icicles hung from the bumpers and side mirrors, sparkling like malevolent diamonds under the security light. The entire parking lot was a skating rink. It was a masterpiece of malicious engineering. I carefully coiled up my steaming hoses, put the sprinklers away, and went inside. I made a cup of tea, the rage now replaced by a profound sense of calm, a deep, Zen-like satisfaction. Then I went to bed. The chaos erupted at precisely 4:17 a.m. It started with a single furious pounding on our front door, then another door. Then our doorbell started ringing, a continuous, frantic buzz. It was quickly joined by a chorus of other doorbells, and more fists hammering on the doors of our other units. Angry, muffled shouts echoed from outside. My wife and I looked at each other in the dark, and we just smiled. We didn't move. We let them pound. We let them ring. We let them scream into the frozen, unforgiving night. After about 5 minutes of the non-stop cacophony, I picked up the phone and calmly dialed 9. "Police, what's your emergency?" "Hello," I said, my voice serene. There's a large, hostile crowd of people creating a disturbance outside my apartment building. They're pounding on all the doors and screaming. I'm a little concerned for my tenants' safety. I gave them the address. They said a car was on its way. We waited until we saw the flashing red and blue lights painting our bedroom walls. Only then did we get dressed and go outside. The scene that greeted us was even better than I had imagined. 2 police officers stood there, flashlights playing over the ice-encased cars, trying to keep a dozen or so furious, shivering people from charging our front door. As we approached, I could see the officers' shoulders shaking. They were trying and failing to hold back laughter. One of them had his hand over his mouth, his eyes crinkling. What in the world happened here? One officer asked, his voice strained with suppressed amusement. The hell are you? A man screamed, pointing at me. He was wearing a ridiculously thin party shirt. I'm going to sue you. You destroyed my car. I recognized him instantly. It was him, the same entitled jerk in the sports car, the idiot who had driven over our bushes months ago. He lived several buildings down the street. I calmly ignored him and addressed the officer. These people are all illegally parked on my private property, officer. I pointed a gloved finger at the giant red and white sign, now conveniently sporting a few icicles of its own. They were instructed to park here by their friend, I said, nodding towards Mr. Bush's, who, I might add, has a history of vandalizing our property. The partygoers started yelling all at once. He said it was okay. My lock is frozen shut. I can't even get my key in the door. One woman was actually chipping away at her windshield, with her high-heeled shoe, with absolutely no effect. I turned back to the officer. In our town, I said, my voice carrying over the din, an officer can issue tickets on private property with the owner's permission. I would like to give you my permission. I want every single one of these vehicles ticketed, and since none of them appear to be movable, I would also like them towed at their owner's expense. The officer looked from the cars, to the furious partygoers, to my calm face. The slow grin spread across his face. He finally lost the battle with his laughter, and let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Yes, sir, he said, composing himself. I believe we can handle that. The 2 officers went to work, the scratch of their pens on the ticket pads echoing in the frozen air. The collective groan from the crowd was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Each ticket was another nail in the coffin of their arrogance. And the grand finale? Because nobody could get into their cars to even attempt to move them. They were all deemed non-operational and obstructing. The police called in the tow company, the very same one I had called earlier. But now it wasn't a low-priority private property request. It was a police-authorized impound. Multiple trucks arrived within 30 minutes. We stood on our porch, sipping hot coffee, and watched as the tow trucks painstakingly hooked up to each and every ice sculpture, one by one, and dragged them away into the pre-dawn darkness. The owners could only stand and watch, shivering in their party clothes, their night of revelry ending with a hefty ticket and an even heftier impound fee. And the best part? To get their cars back, they wouldn't just have to pay the fines. They'd have to figure out how to melt a quarter ton of righteous fury off their vehicles. The sun came up on a beautiful, quiet, and completely empty parking lot. The only evidence of the night's events was a shimmering icy glaze on the asphalt, and the memory of justice, served ice cold. You know, they say revenge is a dish best served cold. But in this case, it was a dish served frozen solid. It wasn't just about parking spots. It was about respect. It was about drawing a line in the ice and proving that when you push a good person too far, their solution might just be colder and harder than you could ever imagine. And that's how a few sprinklers brought an entire party to its knees. What's the most creative revenge you've ever seen or heard of? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of icy justice, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.